thanks very much. It's very nice to be here today, and it's very nice to be in such a nice setting amongst so many interested people in capacity legislation. It was referred to earlier, but it never ceases to amaze me that this many people actually care and want to do something for others that is outside the scope of capacity and supported decision making, that we're here to do what we can and work at it. I came through the mental health services. I gave about 20 years involved with them as a service user, and throughout that 20 years and for some time afterwards, I continuously felt very isolated, very alone, and never knowing really if I would ever get through what I felt I was going through. It was just this incredible feeling of not knowing. So it's really, really good. I really like being involved in this type of work, just to see that there are so many people interested in this aspect of the law, really, and of people's rights. I'd like to thank Cher very much for sharing after certainly educating me as regards decision making, and the other speakers as well. I titled what I'd like to talk about, "What are you going to do?" That's not a dig at anybody who's writing legislation or anything like that. It's not necessarily, although it might serve as a twofold thing like that. But I guess that was a question that was asked of me, and it was the beginning of the rest of my life. It was the beginning of change. It was the beginning of recovery from what I was told I would not recover from. So I became kind of heavily involved with hospitals and doctors and medication and diagnosis and labels. And my understanding of that was based very purely on a medical model. And throughout that, what happened was that I suffered a loss of self-confidence, self-respect, dignity, freedom, self-belief, and every aspect of trust in my life was broken down. And as was said earlier, trust doesn't just pop up overnight. We build trust. And for me, it is built slowly. I start off with every person I meet at 0, and I build from there, whether that's slightly cynical or not. Forgive me if it is. But I do believe in it, and I do believe it's core. It's core, really, in all of what we're talking about today. Throughout my time, specifically inside in the mental health services, I guess I was kind of taken aback every now and again when statements would be floated by me that really were, kind of, they stopped me, and they stopped me in my tracks. I was given advice not to get married. Strong advice. I was given unequivocal advice not to have any children. Bless him. I was told that full-time employment would be out of the question. None of this ever happened in one day. It never happened in one consultation with a doctor or a therapist or anything like that. These are kind of little things that happened over the course of time. And you see, what happened was when those things, even though I didn't fully really understand the full consequences of any of those statements or what they meant, they impacted greatly on those aspects of my person, of myself there. Those aspects of confidence and dignity. And I found myself falling into a position where Dominic captured it really, really well, talking about dignity. Just in bold there and highlighted is we lose dignity if we tolerate the intolerable. And I have been one, and I have met many, many people that spend their lives tolerating the intolerable, doing things that we just would not expect to have to do. And what happens when you find yourself in a position, when you lose your dignity, and you find yourself in a position of tolerating the intolerable, and you've lost all those aspects of self, is that what happened for me is that very, very quickly there came a barrier and a division between myself and the rest of life, community and society, where I felt there was a them and there was me. I didn't even know there was us at the time. I genuinely felt very alone. How this manifested itself at that time was it came out through me as a young man in my 20s. I was very, very angry. If you couple that anger with the label of bipolar disorder or schizoaffective disorder has been put upon me, that becomes a symptom. So, whilst my anger was at the loss of my personhood, it was treated as a symptom of what was felt that was wrong with me. And it's a very, very tough place to start from. It's a difficult place to get going from when you're trying to get yourself explained and put out there, and it's interpreted continually as being a symptom of a disease. I'm just noting to myself, that I'm speaking about mental health, but I do feel like when we talk about dignity and we talk about those things that are lost inside in a person, those aspects of confidence, respect, freedom and belief and trust, I don't think that we, necessarily it's not, although I'm speaking from a perspective of mental health, it is not tied to that on its own at all. So just please to kind of keep that in mind as well. Eventually, I met a peer. I met somebody after coming out of a hospital. I met somebody in the community, and we became great friends. And eventually, this man asked me. He asked me, what are you going to do? And it totally took me aback. I said, what do you mean? I'm going to take my tablets, I'm going to go to the outpatient department, I'm better. And he said, no, what are you going to do? And what that did for me was, although I did not know this at the time, that was the start of a journey of empowerment. And it was the start for me of taking responsibility for my own life. I really and truly had handed over my life and my will to the institution of doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, occupational therapists, nursing, and I did it willingly. And there was many times that I begged to be put into hospital. I was so afraid of where I was in my life. When I was asked that question, what are you going to do? It took me back. It took me back in a big way. As I say, it was the beginning of a journey, a very slow and painful journey, that brought me to the realization that there were things that I could do in my life, and that there were choices that I could make that would impact my life, that I didn't have to leave it up to others. One of those choices one of the consequences of those choices, I presented to my doctor one day. At this stage, I had gotten married, and it wasn't exactly. I didn't exactly get the reception where people threw their arms around me and congratulated me for getting married. But I do remember the day that I told. That's quite difficult, actually. I told my doctor that my wife was pregnant, and the poor man, his eyes fell to the floor. They fell to the floor, and he just couldn't work with it. Like he just couldn't accept it. He was, he's a nice man and he's caring and all of those good things, but he didn't want it for me. He didn't think it was right that I would be able to handle it or do well with it. He's not my doctor anymore. And I have 4 kids now. Maybe I should have gone back to him. So anyway, at this stage I had felt the power of a peer and what that effect could have, and that relationship grew. It grew to the point that it pushed me towards education, re-engaging with education. I did not want to engage with anything attached to the medical profession. That's just my own thing. I have deep respect for the medical profession. I work with them on a daily basis. It's just that I felt if I wanted to get educated, and that if I wanted to be there for others, that I wanted to become educated from outside of that field. And I chose social science, and within it I studied youth and community work, where I immediately fell in love with the idea of critical social education, the teachings of Paulo Freire. And this really is what grounds me in my professional practice, along with the experiences that I've just given you a potted version of. And I really, really like it because I think it's really apt for where we are today and talking about what we're talking about today. Critical social education is designed to encourage questioning and action for change. It is founded on a different worldview, that of participatory democracy forged out of principles of cooperation and equality. Our work is the practice of freedom. This is from an article by Margaret Ledwith, and just at the end of that paragraph she says, "In failing to be vigilant about changes in the political context, we run the risk of developing practice that reinforces discrimination while still waving the banner of social justice." I fear for that. My job title is that of a mental health recovery advocate. I am deeply embedded in our policy, a vision for change. And when I speak about recovery or speak about the policy, the most common retort I get is, "Sure, look, we're all doing recovery." So just with that in mind, that what we're talking about today being legal capacity and decision making, that it has to be more than an act of words, it has to be an act of deed. And speaking about that then, moving on to that then, is I'd like to describe to you very, very briefly about where I work. I work with the Home Focus team, and the Home Focus team it's based in people's homes and out in the community. It is a community outreach service down in West Cork, and it is a recovery-oriented service. Its premise is that we're there to be there for people and get them to engaging with recovery and get them to where they want to be in their lives, where they choose to be in their lives. So it's very much a partnership model. And it's a partnership model with the service user. It's a partnership model in that it's managed by the National Learning Network, and we get most of our support from that, but we work very, very closely with the West Cork Mental Health Services as well. So we have what we're forced into by virtue of that is shared decision making. Now it's really, really interesting that this is where we are by default. We're as a team, we have participants and we have a caseload, and we're there for their recovery. So we're working with empowerment, we're working with choice, we're working with these things all the time. We're trying to work with clear communication, we're trying to be there as much as we can. But the thing about it is that West Cork is a big place. There's 5 members in the team, and we have to be fairly autonomous, so that we don't really have a team leader. We don't have a manager. Well, we do have a manager, but it's outside the immediate working of the team. And so what we get is we get this shared decision making where we're on the phone to each other continuously, and we're running things by each other and asking each other how to do things or where to go, what to do. We share it. And that's on both sides. There is and then I just put that in there because I just think it's a good question to ask. It's a reflective question we ask at our team meetings. Usually somebody throws it out there somewhere. It's relevant nearly all the time. I think it's relevant for even, like, this is a question that I used to ask myself when I was working very hard and very deliberately with my own recovery from my trials and tribulations with mental health. And the question that I originally asked was, am I helping myself to stay sick here, or am I helping myself to get better? That's a question that has developed on into our team meetings, and it's a question that we ask ourselves in regard to the people that we work with. I still ask myself that question, actually, depending on the day and depending on where I'm at. So that's the context of the home focus team and what we try to do, and we do with some degree of success down in West Cork. As I say, the home focus team is in partnership. So one of the deeper partnership projects that we're working with the West Cork Mental Health Services is the open dialogue approach. The open dialogue approach is come from Finland, and I think it really has helped us as a group of professionals. First and foremost, I suppose it's set out there as a model of treatment for service users. In the true essence of the open dialogue approach, and I suppose it being non-judgmental and it being accepting of everybody where they are at, this is taken from Finland, so it possibly is Finnish spoken through English, but you just have to bear with us on that one. I suppose it's a choice that we made, and we decided to stay with it. What I love about this is that it's kind of a how-to guide for us in order to be there for people, to support them, and to empower them to make decisions. I really like it. You know, it's about a conversation. So what you may have is that you'll get a referral for somebody into the service. They will be met on an open dialogue approach, and what then will happen is that a group of professionals, which might be anything, usually 2, may or may not include a doctor, it usually doesn't, will go to the person's home and have a conversation with them to see where they're at. So it's about creating a space between people for generation of new thoughts, because we're trying to avoid traditional and institutional models in this approach, and it's a shared way of talking. And a big part of it is to generate a joint language for experiences that do not yet have words, because a lot of the time it's so tempting to prescribe toward the people that we're working with. It's so easy to just start naming symptoms, and just saying, yeah, this is fitting, this is a box and we can squash you into this box really quickly. So we're trying to go against that. We're trying to go away from that. And whilst we're not exactly a textbook copy of the Finnish model, what we are developing is a West Cork model that sticks very closely to these essential principles of the open dialogue approach. And I really like that part of it, where open dialogue should be the re-establishment or the establishment of heart-to-heart dialogue with significant persons in their social network. So ultimately what you finish up with a first-time referral, you have 2 professionals and a service user, and then the service user will bring in those around them that feels that will be there as supporters, as Cher kindly gave me the term to call them. Thank you. And more often than not, a lot of the time, this may or may not include immediate family. It's really interesting. That, it could be an employer, it could be somebody on the football team. It's open to that. It's there for that. It's about trust. I go back to trust again at the beginning. It's so important. So what we are trying to shoot for is, what we're aiming for is the facilitation of a dialogue with and about the client's narrative. I love it too, because it's about 1.5 years since we trained in open dialogue, and where the challenge has been the most in open dialogue are the peer supervision meetings, where we meet and we sit down as professionals. We do not discuss the participants in the program, but we discuss what has happened for us. The core of open dialogue is that there are no decisions made about the person without the person being there. But at peer supervision meetings, we do talk about the challenges we face as professionals to our practice, which is very interesting, considering, I suppose, that in the middle of all that, I am there as a peer. So what that has forced the more traditional professionals to do is to take note of the language they use, to take note of the word them. And what you'll find is you'll find eyes flitting towards you at meetings. Oh yeah, he's there, oh God. and that's really good. It's really good, and people welcome that. What I really like about the open dialogue approach is that it asks us to tolerate uncertainty. That it's not goal-driven. It's about a process. I'm not going to read out all of this, but the slides are available through the guys from Amnesty, so thanks very much for that. But I love it that the fact that in bold there is that we continually watch out and refrain from becoming overly interventionist. As care providers, we want to provide care, and that's a challenge. So, but it is that how-to guide, and they do explain it. They do that. It is that we have to try and listen generously, that we have patience and slowness of pace by the clinician, and a conscious effort to resist the pull of goals and structures. It's wonderful. There's a beautiful article written about it, all about the beginner's mind, and I think it shifts things dramatically when we approach it from the perspective of a beginner's mind. Then the supporters then, of course, are seen as resources rather than as objects in someone's care. So that's really kind of brief and a really kind of potted version of what we're trying to do in our work in the Home Focus team and in West Cork. The role of peer advocacy then within those services, like well, of course, this is a bit about job security right now, but I really think they're really important. No, but they are, genuinely, and that's backed up in literature, it's backed up in policy, and it's backed up in there in words. Seeing it in deed and in reality is still tenuous at best. If it was a school report card, it would definitely be must try harder. This is a good quote taken from the Psychiatrist Journal. Especially for those detained, peer advocacy is important, especially for those detained under a section of Mental Health Act, because of the powers given to staff. Hopefully that might change a little bit. Under these circumstances, advocacy is valuable and has an important ethical function. Peer advocates are independent of mental health service staff and have usually had first-hand experience of using mental health services themselves. They can therefore be seen as working for the patient rather than the staff. We have a new policy in day services in Ireland. There are 250,000 people attending day services in Ireland. Some of you guys might be familiar with this, I'm sure you are. We have now got new directions, all brand new, all really good. It is good. Quoting from the HSE website, this is a radical change, but it is not the sole responsibility of the HSE, but rather a collaborative responsibility shared between the person, their families and carers, a multiplicity of agencies, government and society as a whole. What New Directions is trying to do is that it is putting upon professionals to engage in a person-centred way. But they're stating it very, very clearly that it has to be definitive. They're calling it radical. We don't do anything radical in Ireland, I don't know. And it's on a HSE website, I think that's a fistprint or a misprint or something. So radical shouldn't be there, but the change. But I suppose what I'm trying to get at there is that Jared spoke really, really well earlier on about the necessity for institutional architecture. You know, here we do have good policy, but what we don't have is grounding for it, and that's what's really, really necessary. We have a willingness to engage. I meet staff all over the country as part of my job, and it's a real privilege to do so. And what I never fails to meet is like, I always encounter enthusiasm. I always encounter a willingness to do the work. I always kind of meet a kind of a trepid attitude towards change, seeing that it's necessary, but not always sure really of how exactly to go about it. New Directions is going to impact upon us, for those of us that work within the day services and the 250,000 people that we work with. It's a huge opportunity to couple it with other changes that are taking place, with legal capacity, with decision making, with the review of the Mental Health Act. I like those words. You know, they're good. You know, the central approach within the report focuses on the core values of person-centeredness, community inclusion, active citizenship, and high-quality service provision. We're being led along the way in word. I'm sorry if I've said it more than once. The other the other area that I just wanted to talk about within mental health is that they're also bringing forward an initiative on ARIs, we're calling them, like advanced recovery initiatives. And once again, it's another big opportunity for services to engage with and work with better aspects of legal capacity, and to better engage with projects like open dialogue that fit so neatly and so hand in glove with the wishes of the CRPD and the proposed changes to the Act. I was just going to have a look here now, sorry now for a minute. And there was so much said earlier on. I really feel that the idea of institutional architecture must happen. See, I suppose what happens is I go back again to meeting professionals every day in my job. And what I do meet people who are willing, but there's an awful lot of, there's a lovely saying in the United States, hard telling, not knowing. And it says so much. It's very hard to do something if you don't know quite exactly what it is you're supposed to do. So, I just think there's huge opportunity in what we have in front of us today. I love that quote that was on there earlier on, underneath the cartoon, by Frank and Ernest. I try to be frank and earnest as much as I can. But I wanted to get your opinion before I go ahead and do what I want to do. I find that with professionals, amongst the people that I work with all the time, just referred to it earlier, I have to say it again, is that urge to fix and that urge to prescribe and assume that we know what a person wants. And as a colleague of mine, a friend of mine on somebody I work with on the Home Focus team, he says about that type of approach, he says, some people get all the exercise they need jumping to conclusions. And I think that that's what we have to try not to do. I suppose, working as a peer advocate then finally, I think that where it happens for me in what I can bring to the job, or what I want to do, what I want to do when I go to work, is I desperately. First, I've two dreams in life, right? The first dream in life is that I will be done out of a job, because people will take it upon themselves. They'll call me up and go, Rory, don't want your help anymore. The other dream I have then is the opposite of that, and that the country is full of peer advocates, that there's one on every community mental health team in the country as prescribed by policy. Currently there are 67 teams, I believe, and I believe I'm the closest thing to a full-time employed advocate. That needs to change. I think that a big role of peer advocacy within those structures that I've talked about there, with regard to open dialogue, with regard to decision making, is I suppose kind of that, almost like impressing. I always try to impress upon service users that there's pain and grief and torment that has been experienced by us that is unique. And I suppose what that does is that develops a culture of fear amongst service users, because there is no trust there with those we've given our care over to. What I add to that then is that there's also fear on behalf of professionals when they're engaging with the likes of myself, who doesn't want to take medication, who doesn't want to attend services, and who wants to take responsibility and control of their lives and their recovery. And I feel that we have a duty speaking as a peer and as a service user, to allay that fear in any way we can. And we can do that when we take responsibility for our choices and when we take responsibility for the decisions that we make. So I think that shared aspect of all of this is crucial, that it's seen to be on all sides. And with that, I'll finish. Thank you very much.